Rush was and still is one of the most underrated and yet talented groups of all time, but their drummer Neil Peart was truly a force of nature. From his impressive drum kit to his hard-hitting and versatile drumming on tracks like Working Man, Tom Sawyer, and The Spirit of the Radio, Neil was one of the greats. In this video, several contemporaries and followers of Neil and Rush have come together to honor his incredible legacy.
Happy birthday, Neil. When I was about 14 years old, I was a sophomore in high school, and I really loved playing drums, and I had played music and drums since I was 7, and sports and other things. But by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I spent, if not all, I would say 80% of my sophomore year in Andover High School outside of Detroit, Michigan, in the parking lot, listening to 2112. And that was pretty much my sophomore year. It was life-changing for me because up until that point, I had an older brother who listened to a lot of the English rock albums, and Led Zeppelin was probably my favorite, and John Bonham's drumming was so influential to me, along with a lot of others, but he was probably my favorite. And so if you think of how John Bonham plays and how Neil plays, they're two different, very distinct, unique, amazing drum styles, but very different. So I was, Bonham trying to do all the triplets and make it feel like him. And then, lo and behold, I get turned on to Rush in 1976 or 77, and it just changed my life. And Neil's drumming was so, just the parts that he came up with and the way, his style, and it was so perfectly, it just fit the music so well, and it was so musical and so just amazing technically, obviously, but just seemed so nothing else. Those were the drum parts that were supposed to be in those songs. And I learned them all, and I would go down in my basement after I wouldn't go to school, and I would put the headphones on, and I'd listen to 2112 and play along with it. And I pretended, like I was in the band, and I changed my whole drum setup. I got 3 rototoms, and then 3 racks, the splash, the cowbells, like a real poor man's version of Neil's kit at that time. And literally, it really changed my life. I could kind of hack my way through his fills and his feels and everything. But I think that any drummer really worth his salt, any rock drummer, needs to have a Neil phase. You need to go through and immerse yourself in the drumming and the music of Rush and the drumming of Neil, in which there is so much, and we're so lucky to still have that today. I went to a Rush concert in 1980, and it was the first concert at Joe Louis Arena. I remember that because came out afterwards, and in the parking lot, our car wouldn't start, and it was in December, and we were stuck in the snow, and nobody to jump our car. So I do remember that very well. But again, just to see him perform and the way that he performed those songs, it was almost as if he was approaching it like a classical musician. Those parts were so well thought out and so well executed, and I've never seen more air drumming in an arena than you would at a Rush concert. And it was just incredible, and I'm seeing my hero for the first time, and it was again another life-changing thing. They were even better live. It was incredible, and he had so much energy, much power, finesse. His drum set looked so fucking cool. I mean, everything about it was just next level. I just floated on home. So fast forward, I joined my little band years later in the late 80s with the Chili Peppers, and we're playing and doing our thing and sloshing around. And, somehow I befriended Alex Lifeson, the guitar player, and we became friends, and one of the funniest people that I know, and an obviously amazing musician. And I tried to cool it with my fandom. I didn't want to tell him what a Rush nerd I am and was. And he's always been so gracious and so nice. And he said, "You got to come to one of our concerts and you be our guest." And so this is probably in the early '90s. And I said, "Is it possible that I could, meet Neil?" He said, "Sure, I'll tell him. Yeah, of course. I'll introduce you to him." So I go, I'm all nervous, and I think it was at the Universal Amphitheater. And so I go and get my tickets, and there's passes and, all the laminates and all that stuff. And I walk in, and somebody finds me from their group. Like a road manager person said, "Oh, Neil wants to see you." I'm like, okay. I'm like, and he's in his little dressing room inside, and I think I was with Chris Stanke from Sabian. He was a good friend of his, and I go in, and I'm nervous, and sometimes you don't want to meet your heroes kind of thing, but I open the door. "Hey, Chad." I didn't even know that he knew I existed on the planet. He's like, "Man, thank you so much for coming. Alex told me about you guys." And he's like, I love your music, and your drumming is really great." And like sometimes people say that, and like, yeah. But then he starts on the song and this groove, and what were you doing, thinking what kind of drums, and like he really he was legit. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I couldn't even be like, "Oh, but you have no idea," I don't want to freak him out. But he was so kind and generous and thoughtful and like just humble. And I always took that away as like, here's someone who's like in the top 3 rock drummers of all time. And he's, taking the time to like talk to this kid at the time-ish and like just really, really like cool and nice. And he had this real dry sense of humor. And but he was really funny. I think a lot of people think, and I thought like when he's drumming, he's so serious, he never cracks a smile, And I'm thinking, man, this guy's like, this dude's serious cat. And when he's playing, he's all business, but he's funny and like, he was just really warm and it was great. And I was talking to him, and I think I may have mentioned the fact that like I was really, because what drummers do you like? And we talked about Stewart Copeland. I love him. And then I told him I was really into John Bonham. And then when I was in high school, I really got into Rush and your drumming. And I said, "It's so different." And he goes, "Yeah, Bonham had that swing." And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "I have the Canadian swing." Like, I got such a kick out of him. And like really, was poking fun at himself or whatever. So that was the beginning. That's when I met him. And then, years would go by and I would see him whenever they would come in concert. And then one time he did a Buddy Rich thing, and it was in New York City, and we were rehearsing here. I'm at the drum channel in Oxnard, and Terry Bozzio was on it, and Neil was on it. Some other really great players and musicians were here, and we were rehearsing with the band. And it was a big band, an orchestra, and a whole thing. And it wasn't Buddy's band, but it was a band from here. Anyway, we're rehearsing, and I never played in front of Neil. So I was like, I'm sitting, and I'm out of my element playing like these Buddy Rich charts and songs, and like big band's not my thing. And I'm kind of just winging it, just holding on for dear life, hoping it's going to be okay. And so there's Terry and Neil and Don and some other people are sitting behind me, and I'm playing this Weather Report song and just going for it, like just really going for it as hard as I can, trying, knowing like I'm not looking over here, and I'm playing all my stuff. Song's over. Terry, who's always so supportive. That sounded amazing. You sound like Tony Williams, this and that. And the other thing, I'm like, oh, thank you, Terry, so much, so sweet. And Neil comes over to me, and he kind of looks around the drums, and he looks at me, and he goes, do you think you could play a little bit harder? Which is so Neil, because I was bashing my brains out, which I normally do, but this was extra. So and he looked at me and kind of winked and laughed. And it was so fun, and he was so cool, and we had such a good time. And then, I would fast forward to the last concert that Rush ever played was at the Forum in Los Angeles. And I was there at the last night, and there were Taylor Hawkins and Danny Carey and Stewart Copeland. We're all sitting in a row and we're all air drumming, and it's a great, amazing show. Little did we know that was the last time that they would ever play. You know, and the same four guys were honored to be at his memorial as well. And Stewart got up and said a few things, and he said, at one point, he said, you know, I can't tell you on the count of my hand how many people have come up to me and said, hey, you're my second favorite drummer. And we all laughed and we all nodded, because Neil is Neil, and there's only one, and there'll never be another one. He's amazing. I love him. I love his family. They're just incredible people, and what a legacy. Yeah. God bless Neil Peart.
I can't possibly overstate how much Rush had an influence on me as a young teenager. I would say from like around 1981 to about 1987, they were my gods. You know, Neil Peart was my god at that point, and was a huge influence on my drumming. You know, the size of the drum set, the way I approached the drums, the odd time signatures, the progressive styled instrumental music. I mean, just everything about Rush at that point when I was a developing teenager was huge. And I've seen them on every tour since then. I haven't missed a tour, and you know, all through these years, 30 years later, I'm still, you know, just as much of a fan and a supporter as I ever was. And yeah, you know, it's amazing that they're now celebrating 40 years. It's incredible. It's amazing how time flies. I remember seeing them for the first time on the Signals tour in '82, I think, and that's like, you know, 30 something years ago at this point. It's crazy.
It's been open season on drummers. You know, it seems like a very short period that Ginger Baker, Neil Peart, Charlie Watts, and now Taylor. And it's just not right. You know, Neil Peart and Ginger Baker, one of the last recordings he did was right there. He came over one afternoon and he was kind of ailing. He was here with his daughter. He played for 1 minute, which is, by the way, is on YouTube, The Sacred Grove. Wow. And then he sort of finished, and 20 minutes later, the paramedics arrived and wanted to take him to hospital. You can old fuck. Oh, if I'm not going to know, fucking old spit. Oh, he said in its kindly tones. But Neil, he knew it was coming. In fact, it took about 2 years longer than expected. At one point, he says, dude, I am past my sell-by date by a year. And then he carried on for another year. But so he saw it coming. He made his peace. He was all adjusted, and everybody, you know, his close friends were with him. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was really a first-class ticket. He saw his train coming.
Did they know? You know, did they know they touched everybody's life this way?
I think the one with the least idea of how important he was would be Taylor. I mean, Neil knew that he was a professor, and that, you know, all he had to do was play a show, and there's 80,000 people air drumming every lick. And same with Charlie, and same with Ginger Baker. And there's another thing that I remember with Neil. When he first passed, I got a call from his roadie that afternoon. And that night, the band, family, crew, gathered in a restaurant in Venice Beach. And I had seen it coming. I felt that it was a full ride, a full life, well lived, and I was full of, you know, I was kind of upbeat about it. But I get there, and the people who are with, because I just hang out with them occasionally, but the people who he's in their lives every day, his wife, his crew, Alex and Getty, they were just, you know, blown away. Even though they also saw it coming, but this hole in their life suddenly. Okay, cut to 2 weeks later, the memorial service. By now, it's sunk in. The professor is gone. You know, the no more hang at the Bubba Cave. You know, and it really started to get to me. And at the memorial, his family and closer people had kind of begun to deal with it, and were able to smile again at the memory of his life. And there was, in fact, you know, Dwayne, Jethro Tull's drummer, and Taylor, Chad Smith, Denny Carey.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a crap name dropper because I can never remember any of my best friends' names. I would be absolutely terrible. I can just remember that guy who played in.
Right. We'll blame it on the curse of his show.
Lamenting,
Yeah.
we all kind of were feeling it by that time, whereas Getty and Alex were kind of comforting us by that time.